Hi, this is Brita Fletcher from Ponderosa FFA Floral, and today I'm going to be demonstrating for you how to make a wired and taped pin-on corsage similar to this one that would be worn on the shoulder, and it's going to be this elongated shape and somewhat of a crescent. And then on the back, it's completely finished. That's our goal. So I want to demonstrate this today because this is a skill I don't always have time to teach during class. We do get called for pin-on corsages, but it's generational and it has to do with this, what is in style at the moment. And so if you were to ask the young people in my class, what is a corsage, they will automatically think of something that's going to be worn on the wrist, on something like this. So this is one type of wristlet. It's a snap bracelet. Oh, snaps that way. And the corsage, of course, would be worn on the wrist. And what we would do with that type of corsage is we would glue with floral adhesive directly to this little base that is here, or you can create your own base if you're working on a ribbon or something like that. If you are going to make a wristlet corsage, I definitely suggest that you use floral adhesive and not any other material or any other type of adhesive. Floral adhesive was developed specifically to be used with flowers. It doesn't damage the flowers. Hot glue does. And I really can't think of any other product that would benefit you as much as a floral adhesive. So it's worth the investment to find some if you want to glue a bunch of corsages together, or even just one for a dance. That's the other thing, is we think of corsages only for weddings and dances, and maybe we need to broaden our thinking about that a little bit. So you would just glue greens onto here as a base or ribbon. There are all different kinds of styles. Put on your filler and then put on your flowers and so on to create this wristlet type of corsage. So that's what young women in high school specifically right now think of as a corsage. But if you are to talk to a bride's mother or grandmother or aunt, or possibly someone who's going to be speaking at an event, like the member of the clergy who is officiating a wedding, they might not want something on their wrist. They might be holding a book. They might be holding some papers as they're speaking. If it's someone who's giving a presentation and you want to show that they are the keynote or the guest of honor, it might be uncomfortable for them to wear a wrist corsage. Like if they are referencing a slideshow as they're speaking, it might just be better for them to have something more stable, I guess, on their clothing that they can forget is even there. And Mother's Day is coming up. Anniversaries, birthdays, there are all kinds of times when you could make a person feel special by making them a corsage. So we want to broaden our thinking about that first of all. But let's get started. What you will need for this, if you haven't watched the boutonniere making video, you might want to watch that, because I'm not going to go back through all of those skills, because basically what you do is you're going to make 5 little boutonnieres to start with. Okay. And your main flower, I'm using spray roses here. You want 2 that are smaller, like buds. I only have 4 because I'm going to demonstrate one for you. But you want 2 that are smaller, like buds, 2 that are medium-sized, and then 1 that is your big open flower. That's the star of the show. And filler, as we've discussed in previous videos, is personal. Some people like a lot of it and some people don't. I'll show you the basics of how to put that together. I wire and taped this rose. Let me show you that quickly. I got carried away and went ahead with that step. So let me remind you how that is done. So you remove the stem. The reason we're removing the stem is to take out the bulk and the weight. When someone wears a corsage or a boutonniere or a flower crown, any flowers to wear, they should forget that they have it on. It should feel very comfortable and light, like wearing a watch or glasses or a piece of jewelry. You should just forget you have it on. This is size 26 gauge wire, and you're going to pierce the receptacle of this rose straight through, like that, perpendicular to the stem, and then you're going to bend that down. So my wires are going straight down and they've replaced that stem. The wires are the mechanic, they're what are giving the structure to our flower, but we don't want those to show. So we're going to use floral tape. Floral tape sticks to itself once you start stretching it. And so you'll just start here at the top and you'll go around once to make it stick to itself. And then you need to pull it, put some tension on it so that it will have that sticky property that kind of activates it. And go ahead and tape all the way down that wire. And then I'm going to back this up with some greens. I'm using a eucalyptus called Eucalyptus Guneye today. And I love this eucalyptus because it has a more delicate look to it than some of our larger leafed eucalyptus that we use. So it's really pretty. So we usually have green in our background when we're making a boutonniere or any design. Actually, green is our neutral, so it's often our background. And then I will put in some filler. In this case today we're using baby's breath. And the blooms on this baby's breath look so big because this variety is called Excellence. And that is what the variety is all about. It has these beautiful large blooms. So one thing to think about when you're making this wired and taped corsage, more so than maybe what you would normally do in a boutonniere, is make sure you get some filler in the front because otherwise that green tape is going to show later. So make sure you have some filler in the back and the front. Now I'm just going to tape this all together just a couple of times around, because then, see all those stems? And one of them is our taped wire. I want to keep the taped wire long, but then I'm going to go back and cut these stems at various lengths, tapering them to again take that bulk out and that weight out. And then I will continue taping, and I will just tape as long as I need to just to meld those loose stems together with what I had already taped. So I'm not going to tape all the way down again. We don't want to keep adding more and more tape. We actually want to do the opposite. We want to use as little as we possibly can. All right, so other things that you're going to need to do this particular corsage, and of course there are all different styles of corsages that you can make. This is just the kind I like to start with my students. You're going to have two ribbon flags, and I'll make one quickly to show you how to do that. A florist bow. This is a six loop bow. And wire cutters, corsage pins, and you'll need a little more of that same ribbon that you used on your bow for us to finish it at the end. And then we already talked about the size 26 gauge wire, which is it's a heavy enough wire to do what we need to here, but it's not too heavy. All right, I'm just kind of taking inventory and making sure I have all my flowers that I needed. All right, so here's how you make a ribbon flag. This is about 4 inches long. You fold it once on top of itself. You fold it again, and see how it makes that little tunnel in the bottom. You're going to take a piece of 26 gauge wire and you're going to put the wire through that tunnel on the bottom, like this. Bend it down. You're creating a stem essentially for this flag. Pinch it, pinch the wire together, and then twist the ribbon. And then you'll have a little flag. Now see how my flag is going sideways? It's misbehaving. So when we go to tape it, because of course we're going to cover our mechanics of our wire, you want to start taping up here on the flag itself, on the fabric. And if you do that, then you are you have control over it, and you're going to make it stand straight up. And then you're just going to tape down your wire as you have done everything else. All right, so there's your little flag. Now this is something you could put in a boutonniere too. It's just a little accent piece of color. And so sometimes we'll have a couple come in, and let's say the woman is going to wear a dress. She's going to wear a red dress, and she would like it to look like her escort is, or her date is matching, that they coordinated. And so she might want to have a little red flag put in with his white boutonniere that he's going to get. Okay, so we're going to work with establishing rhythm and balance by starting with the smallest items towards the outsides and moving towards the largest focal point towards the center, which is going to be your largest rose and your bow. So we're going to have those 2 buds on the outside, 2 medium, the largest flower, and the bow when we get to the center. So we'll start with our buds. So you're going to take one of your little corsages that has the bud, the smallest flower, and you're going to go ahead and tape the flag to the back of that. Now, when we start to assemble, we're only taping to connect things. So that only took 2 times around. Those 2 things are connected. I'm not going to tape all the way down. Now I'm going to put in a medium-sized flower. And this is a little like dancing in a mirror. Sometimes I have to turn it to myself to see what I'm doing. But I'm going to put a medium-sized flower next. And here's how I gauge where to put that flower. So see where the color of this bud stops, the pink stops here. That's where the pink on my next bloom starts. So you want to leave a little bit of space between those 2, and you want to stagger them as you're moving down. So I'm going to put that one about there and tape that in. All right, so here's a small bud, a medium. Now I'm going to put in my largest flower. And today my spray roses, these are spray roses, are very tight. All of them are very closed, and that's a good thing. That means that they are fresh. Your flowers should be very tight and closed when you buy them. Unless you need them a few hours later, then you may want to look for some that are ready to go. But for example, in our program, if you have some kind of cooler, not your refrigerator, don't ever put your flowers in your refrigerator, because all produce gives off a naturally occurring hormone called ethylene when it starts to mature and ripen, and so do flowers. And the more ethylene there is in your refrigerator, the faster everything will mature and ripen. That's why one bad apple spoils the bunch, because if you have one apple that is rotting like in a barrel, it's going to give off so much ethylene that it will increase the rate at which everything around it is going to spoil as well. And so when we talk about a cooler and you're at home, what I usually suggest is a beverage cooler, like that you would take on a picnic or to the beach. And you put ice in the bottom and then put a towel over the top of that so the ice is not directly touching your flowers and freezing them, but it's keeping everything cold. And then put your corsage or boutonniere on top of that and then close it. So it's staying cool. Put it in the coolest part of the house, in the garage, wherever that may be. And so that will keep your flowers fresher longer. At school, of course, we have a cooler. And so we would typically make corsages on a Thursday for a Saturday night dance. So we'd make them on Thursday, they'd get picked up Friday afternoon, and then hopefully the person would have someplace cool to put them, and then they would wear them on Saturday night to the dance. So here's our next largest flower. Oh, I was saying they're very tight. So you can, with roses, you can take your fingers and open these up just a little bit. Try not to bruise them, especially when we have a light color like this, or if you had white. I'm not sure I would recommend that because they will get bruised. But see how I kind of went to that side with the first one, this side with the second. I'm going to go to this side with the third. And again, actually I'm not, I'm going to go this way. That's the beauty of wire. We can move things later. No, I don't know. Flowers aren't perfect. They're plants. They're natural. This is what I'm going to do. I'm coming to this side with that flower, but see how I'm developing a hole here? So this is where you need to have possibly a little more filler ready to go, or even some more greens. I'm gonna put some greens on that side and kind of take care of that hole as I go along. Fill that in a little bit because I know it will be there when I get finished if I don't fix it now. And that brings up a good point. This is, for many people, tedious work. This is called handwork. And you can see we're not using a great amount of materials. And so sometimes people get frustrated. I went ahead and put some in that hole. Now I'm going to tape this together. People get frustrated and say, why would a corsage and a boutonniere cost so much? There are very few materials there. Well, it's like any business. The most expensive part of any business is labor. And this is labor intensive. And so that's what you're paying for. You're paying for skill and you're paying for labor when you pay for a corsage or a boutonniere. So I'm just going to show you the back for a second. We have a saying that a customer looks at the beauty on the front. And if you hand this to a florist, one of the first things they're going to do, or your floral teacher, is they're going to turn it around and look at the back. And they're going to see, what does your taping job look like? What skills do you have and how did you employ those? And so this is similar to cooking. That's what I always think of. If you are baking a cake in the kitchen and you crack the eggs and you get some shells in there and you say, oh, well, it's just a couple shells. And then you don't measure the flour quite right. You put a little too much flour, and maybe you don't measure the next ingredient at all. You just throw it in. You're not going to have the best result when you're done. And that's true of floral design as well. So you could not do the greatest job taping as you go along because this is repetitive and tedious work for a lot of people. But if you do a mediocre job the whole way through on every step, then you can't expect this product at the end to look great. And so we should be trying our best. Like here, I want to show you, this is basically a straight line we're taping right now. Don't worry, we'll be able to manipulate where the flowers are later. But we want our taping job to be as smooth as possible and as even as possible. That's something we should be paying attention to as we go along. All right, now we're at the center, and so here's my bow, and this is part of my focal point. It's going to put the weight in the center. That's going to help with that rhythm and balance. It's not going to look top heavy like it's going to fall over. It's not going to look bottom heavy. We're focusing our weight here in the center. And so when you go to put your bow in, really smash it up under that biggest flower that you've put in, because if you put the bow down low, you'll have this tape showing and you'll never be able to cover it. So put that up high, right under that last flower, tape it in. Now, if I wasn't talking so much, I could maybe do one of these in 20 minutes. And that's probably what your goal should be eventually, is 20 to 30 minutes if you really want to work in the industry. And some shop owners would say that's even too slow. You have to go faster than that. So at this point, we have half of our corsage done, and we have 2 of these little boutonnieres still to attach. And so some florists at this point would put these 2 together, and then they would marry the 2 and have the stems crossing in the back. That's not the way I learned. And so that's not the way that I continue to do it. That doesn't work the best for me. What I learned is now we need these flowers to be coming upside down underneath the corsage. And so but I want all my stems to come straight down. So in order to do that, I'm going to make a very severe bend in that one so that I can tuck it in here upside down underneath the bow. And then you can see, let me get you a good shot. You can see that bend right there in the wire. I'm going to line that up with everything else I've taped, and I'm going to tape that in. So the most important thing to think about with this little piece here is just to make sure you're getting it right up under the bow. And then you'll do the same thing with its buddy. That needs to come upside down right there. And so I'm going to make an even more severe bend. This one basically is completely upside down. I'm going to put that bend again in line with all the other pieces of the stem here. And then I'm going to tape that piece in. I always tell my students, you are the human being. You are in charge of the flowers. And so although they may want to move in various directions and not work exactly the way you want them to, you're in charge. You have the brain. So you have to eventually make these flowers go where you want them to go. All right, please don't worry about how this looks on the front right now because we're working on all of our mechanics. And so this is what our mechanics look like. This is what we're concerned with. We have basically a straight stem. This is where we connected our last piece. And then we have all of these wires. There are no stems here because as I made the little boutonnieres, I pruned the stems out to get rid of all that bulk and weight. So these are all wires. I have a long wire. I forgot to tell you that. On your bow, leave one wire full length, and I'll show you why when we get to the end, what you're going to do with that. So we don't want to cut that. Keep that long wire intact. But now all of these, we don't want to put them together in one thick stem. That's what we've been trying to avoid the whole time. So we're going to come in with our wire cutters and we're going to taper these down at different heights, different lengths, I guess. And then we'll pull it all back together. And then we're going to cover all of that. We're going to tape from where we left off all the way down this long wire. So this gets a little silly because as we're eventually just taping this long wire, there's so much weight here in the corsage, it'll flop all over the place and it's a little hard to handle, but it's worth it. You'll see how we're going to finish this. I learned this from another florist and I really like the way we finish it. So we should talk about proportion and scale. So proportion is the size of the arrangement in relation to its container, and scale is the environment in relation to the size of the arrangement. So if you are doing a design for a graduation ceremony, it's going to be large scale so that the people, see how long that gets? That's plenty. I don't need it to be longer than that, so I'm going to stop. So if you're doing an arrangement for a graduation ceremony, it's going to be very large so that people sitting in the bleachers can see it and appreciate it. And if you're doing a corsage, of course, that's small handwork. But you really hopefully should have some kind of idea of the recipient and their size, because in flowers to wear, the proportion and the scale is based off of the person. The person is like the container. So that's not perfect. We don't always know what people look like, but if we do, then we can make it in proportion to their body size. All right, so I have taped quite a long way down here. I'm going to cut this a little shorter, but you can see that at this point, here's what it looks like in the back. And some people would just cut it right here And then they would put the pins in the back and the person would just pin it on. I guess this one's going this way. And then that little stem of green would be covered by the flowers once we get them all into place. And so that's one option. Another option is to cut it a little bit longer and then to twirl it with a pen or pencil and make it look like a little grape tendril. And that's just a little more decorative. But I learned this from another florist, and I really like this technique. As opposed to having all that green tape showing, this just takes it to the next level. So this is where you're going to take your extra ribbon, and where you left off with your tape up here, as high as you can go, you're going to start ribbon wrapping. So right there. That's as high as I can go without the stems being in the way. So just like you did with your tape, you're going to go around once. I have a leaf that's in my way, so beauty of wire. I'm gonna push it way up. I can move it later. You can see, again, don't pay attention to this. We're doing all of our mechanics first. And you will just use this like you do tape and start coming down the stem. And this just gives it a little more dressed up look. I had a wonderful landscape design teacher in college. And I remember one time we were doing a lab and we were outside planting a landscape, and we were just planting these little flowers from six-pack pots into the ground. And when we were done, we thought we were done, and we picked up all of our tools and we were ready to walk away from the job, and we had left all of the little plant stakes, the little names, those plastic names that are stuck in the pots. We had left those around in the landscape. At the bottom here, I'm going to leave a little bit of green like this. I'll show you why. And I'm going to cut my ribbon. I'm going to leave quite a bit of length so it's easy to work with. At this point, you bend this stem up and back on itself like that. And so that is keeping all this ribbon from slipping off the bottom. And then you take your ribbon and you go around that to hide it, because we don't want the end of that wire showing. And then you tie a little knot here with your ribbon to hold it all in place. So he said, "You're not done. Take a look." And it would seem like such a small thing that we would leave these plant stakes out, and we had planted this very nice landscape, and would the homeowner really care? But his point was, you could be a mediocre landscaper and you could leave your job site like that, but that is not what an excellent landscaper does. That's not quality work. And so would those people call you back? Not necessarily. And we would like to be great florists. You know, why strive to be mediocre? So that's what I'm talking about here. This is one little step that probably took me a minute to do, and it'll take a little practice. All of this takes practice. So sometimes students get very frustrated, or new designers get frustrated because it didn't turn out right. Well, it's like any skill. The first time you do it, you're learning the skill. The second time, you're reinforcing that, and maybe it's gonna look a little better. And then maybe by the third time, you'll be getting into the groove, and you'll become happier with how it looks. So we have this long ribbon wrap stem, and we'll fit that in at the end. But now we do need to pay attention to the front. So what I'm going to do with the front is I'm going to pull this smallest bud straight down, because remember, we're making a linear design, right? And then I'm going to take, see, I put that one way up out of the way. Here's my medium flower. I'm going to pull that one down. I'm going to adjust my bow a little bit, get that more forward facing. Adjust this medium one down, or this is my largest one, my medium one here. Just make sure everything is where it should be. I have to turn it to myself now for a minute so I can actually look at it. All right, so this is where we're going to end up. with our flower placement. So we have our smallest buds and our flags towards the outside and our largest flower and our bow towards the inside here, the middle. That's called transition, when you go from largest to smallest. And then we're going to finally take this little tail and we're going to bend it back up, and then you can just tuck it in where you need it. So for example, I have somewhat of a hole right here on this side of my design. And so that would be a great place for me to wind this around and get this little flag tucked in there. It just becomes a decorative element of the corsage then, and helps to even that out. And this is what it looks like on the back. So you have less of that greenery showing. And if you feel like that's not stable enough, it might move around, just intertwine it, but I won't take the time to do that right now. So at this point, that's about what you're looking for there. So I always like to give the person 2 corsage pins, and I just stick those down into this, oh, sorry, can't see me. Can't see me talking. Put this down into the tape so it's not going to poke anyone. We don't want anybody getting hurt or bleeding on their beautiful clothes. And I always give people 2 because a corsage is usually worn for a special occasion and people are nervous and fumbling, hands shaking, you know, all those things that have to do with nerves. And they don't need to be crawling on the ground in their beautiful dress searching for a corsage pin. Let's make it easiest for everybody concerned. All right, so there you have it. There is our wired and taped pin-on corsage. I hope you learned something new. And that's the end of the corsage instruction. I think I will take a few minutes to show you a florist bow just in case you don't know how to do that, so that you can have that piece to put in here. But thank you for joining me for the corsage. All right, for a florist bow, unless you need a whole length of wire like I just talked about, we always cut our wires in half because it saves us money. And what I did for the wired and taped corsage in terms of ribbon is I did an arm's length like that, because in class we build our bows off of the rack, off of the ribbon rack. But in life here, I had to cut them and bring them home. So, and we always use our body parts to measure, because if I say to someone, you need 2 feet of ribbon, you'll have the person who will measure 2 feet and you'll have the person who will estimate 2 feet. And a lot of times our estimation is off. But if you say you need an arm's length, it's basically the same for a lot of people. We would have what we needed there. So that's what you would need to do what I just did. The 2 flags, the bow in the middle, and be able to wrap that stem about that much, okay? So this is how you make a florist corsage, or this is how I do it. And there are a bunch of ways, different ways, but this is how I do it. So I hold the tail between 2 fingers. I'm going to bring the ribbon up and around my thumb to create the button, the center of the bow. Okay, so there's my button. So it was just like this. I bring it up and around my thumb. And then you twist that. You twist the tail and you push the ribbon away from you to create your first loop. You do the same going up. So when we build this, we're going to be going up and down, up and down. So on the top, you twist it again, you push the fabric away from you, and you create the next loop. The reason we're twisting is because not all ribbon looks the same on both sides, and classic acetate floral ribbon has a dull side and a shiny side, and you always want the shiny, pretty side out towards the customer. But twisting it as you go, you twist and make a loop down, twist and make a loop up. Twisting it as you go also, most people believe, helps to hold the center of your bow together better. It helps to give it more strength. So I'm going to make a 6-loop bow. So I went down, twist, go up. And I'll tell you that in class with high school students, I should hold it this way. So we've got 3 up, 3 down, button in the middle. With high school students, we'll spend about a week in class to a week and a half in class learning how to make bows and then practicing making bows. And if this were still attached to the ribbon rack at this point, I would cut this, and I'm going to go ahead and cut it. And in this style of bow, your tail should be the same length as your loop. You're not leaving these long tails on. Always cut at an angle so that your ribbon doesn't fray. So a week to a week and a half of learning and practicing. And some students are really good at this skill, and for some, they'll struggle with this for a long time. And those of you who were in my class, maybe you're a graduate watching, hi, good to see you. You know if you were a bow master, because after I have my students make their initial bows, I don't always make them continue to do that, to struggle all year with it. For some people, it's just a really difficult skill. And so after they've proven to me and themselves they can do it, then they can ask a friend later in the class, later in the year to do it. But it takes a while, so try not to get frustrated if you're not getting it right away. At this point, I'm going to take my half wire. I'm going to put it here through the button, that first loop we made between that and my thumb. And then I'm going to sneak it behind my thumb. So now the wire is between my thumb and this stack of ribbon that I have. And I'm going to pull the wire down on either side of our loops that are going up and down. It's a little bit hard to show. So here's one side of the loops, here's the other. I'm pulling my wire directly opposite, and I'm going to pinch it as tight as I can. And then I can finally let go and not cramp my hand anymore. So here's the button of the bow, and the wire is directly opposite that. At this point, you don't want to twist on the wire side. You'll never get it tight. You cup the bow gently like that and turn it 3 times. I do it 3 times. And then that should have created a bow that will stay together, that's tight enough to stay together. So like I said, that's a fast lesson in how to tie a bow, and there are certainly other resources to find that, or you could just rewind this and try again and again. There may be a better technique for you in creating a bow, but what you're looking for is even loops on each side. This is an elongated style of bow, and the reason why that's fine for us right now is because look where it's going to end up. It's going to end up coming straight across that corsage. If it's round, it actually is going to take up quite a bit of room. So my preference is for it to be an accent in this corsage, but not to be the star of the show. The person didn't walk into the shop and say, I want to buy a bow. They walked in and said, I want to buy a corsage. And so the bow should be an accessory to that, not everything they paid for. All right, thank you for joining me. I hope you learned something today, and keep designing. Have fun.